Hello, my friends. Hello, and welcome once again to Stately Vaughan Manor, where Roger and I have returned to talk about a mysterious phenomena. We're talking about reading slumps today. Roger, we're talking about reading slumps, which sound terrible. A reading slump. This is a thing I had never heard of, much like BookTube itself, until I started watching BookTube. And then I would start to hear, now and again, about people who suffer from this terrible affliction, which is the reading slump, which does sound like a horrible thing. Where suddenly a diehard reader suddenly decides they don't decide, they just start losing interest in reading everything they read. They can't really get into it. They DNF. That means do not finish, Roger. See, I watch BookTube. They DNF a lot of books that they read, and they just can't finish a book or get into reading. And these are people who love to read, so this is distressing. And I started to wonder as I heard about this phenomenon, well, why haven't I ever had one of these? Because I never have. I at least I could never remember having a reading slump. And I suspect, I have no proof of this, but I suspect this probably doesn't happen to too many casual readers. If you think about the casual reader, it's somebody that might read 1, 2, 3 books a month. Believe it or not, most people who read books read maybe 1, 2, or 3 books a month. And they might be really into one thing. Like my grandfather, for example, was really, really into Westerns, and that's all he read. Well, he read Tarzan too. He liked the Tarzan books. Tarzan and Westerns, that's it. But he was more of a casual reader, and a casual reader usually spends a lot of other time doing other things. They'll watch television, they'll go to movies, or plays, or concerts. They have what are those things called? Families. They have other people that live in their house that they have to spend time with. And, they have a lot of demands on their time. They work. And so they have a bunch of stuff going on and a bunch of different entertainment options that they're into all of this stuff. But they're also readers, right? And so they'll read their detective novels or their romances or their World War II history. So whatever it is that they really, really like, they'll read that stuff. And I think that for a lot of casual readers, if they get into a reading slump, they probably don't even know it. They just spend all the rest of their time reading. They'll spend the rest of the time like watching Seinfeld reruns or something. I don't know what they do, but they'll put a book down and they might not pick another one up right away, and they're busy doing other things, and then they'll pick a book up when they feel like it. I think most people are like that. But if you're watching this video, and if you watch a lot of BookTube, and if you're really into reading, if you're a really diehard reader, that's a whole different story. Other BookTubers are the people who watch this stuff. You're probably really, 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 really into reading. That's your main thing. That's the main thing that you do. And I think reading slumps are more likely to afflict you, if you're a really diehard reader. And I suspect, again, I have no proof of this, Roger, I suspect reading slumps happen for all kinds of different reasons. I don't think there's just one reason that suddenly you lose interest in reading. And I'm sure that all of these videos that are out there, because if you look up reading slump on BookTube, you'll get a million videos, right? A million, and most of them are how to get out of reading slumps. Here's the 5 ways to get out of a reading slump. Here's the 10 ways to get out of a reading slump. Here's the 20 ways to get out. There are a bunch of ways, apparently, to get out of a reading slump. So if you want to get out of one, man, you're covered, because there are a gazillion videos. I don't know how helpful they are, but they exist. But I think getting into one is probably different for everybody. And I think the problem is, and I wonder if a lot of those videos can be helpful. I think the problem very often is that reading slumps probably have a lot to do with other things that are going on in your life, right? I think they probably have a lot to do with, you know, maybe you're overworked, maybe you're stressed, maybe you've got depression. There are all kinds of other things that happen in your life that can affect your reading or your interest in reading. And fixing those things has nothing to do with reading. You know, those things have to be dealt with if they're affecting the rest of your life. And I think a lot of times reading slumps come from that. Although, like I said, there are probably a million different reasons why different readers get into reading slumps. And they're probably all unique to the individuals. And so getting out of one probably is something you're going to have to figure out on your own, really. You've got lots of advice you could take, apparently. But getting into one is, I think there are probably different reasons. But I have speculated, why have I never been in a reading slump? Because I just can't remember ever getting into one. And I'm like a super diehard reader. That's like the thing that I do, clearly. And I think back, and I think I might have gotten into reading slumps now and again, except that my interests can be varied. Like I remember, what will happen with me is I can get really, really into like one subject, and that'll dominate everything else. Like I think it was around 2002 or 2003 or sometime around there, I got really, really interested in the American Revolution and the founding of the American government. And I would read like every book about that subject to the exclusion of everything else. And then around 2006 and 7, I've always been interested in this, but I got really interested in ancient history, like really interested. And I would read every book of ancient history that I could find and everything that came out to the exclusion of all else. And I do remember that when I tried to pick up anything else, whether it was science fiction or horror or even comic books, I would lose interest. I would read them, but I would put them down and maybe not pick up another one, and I would get back to the ancient history that was really dominating my interest at the time. And that went on for years, a few years actually. So I remember that happening. So it's not the same thing because I was reading constantly, but I became really focused on one thing. And then that would be over. I would still be interested in that stuff, but I would read other things. And one thing I think is that if you're a reader like I am, or like a lot of the readers that watch booktube videos or make booktube videos, there can be a danger, I think, in reading too narrowly, having a narrow field of interest in the things that you read. Now, this might sound funny coming from me and Roger, because for the past few years, it's all been pulp, horror, science fiction, that sort of stuff, all the time for the past few years. But that's been the past few years. I actually have, in my history of reading, I've read all kinds of different things. And so eventually what will probably happen is my focus will shift to other stuff as well. Who knows? Maybe I'll get really, really interested in the Renaissance or something. Who knows? Who knows what'll happen? But I think that if you read fairly narrowly, if you have like one or two kinds of things that you really, really like to read to the exclusion of all else, and that's all you read, if you're a reader like us on BookTube, that could be a danger. I think you could burn out on that. There are the fantasy channels where all they read are epic fantasies. I like fantasy, but if that's all I read, I would probably get into a reading slump, I would imagine. I mean, reading more than 2 or 3 Brandon Sanderson books would probably melt my brain, and I would just want to watch cartoons, Who knows? But I think reading with a narrow focus of interest. And some people have no problem with that, even people who read all the time. Of course, everybody's different. And I think it doesn't affect casual readers so much. Like I said, you could be like really interested in romances or westerns and nothing else. But if you just don't feel like reading, you just, do something else, But if you're a reader and that's what you do, and suddenly you're not interested in everything you pick up, I suspect in a lot of cases that could be just because you're burnt out on the type of thing that you're reading. You just can't read one more book like this. You need something else. And I think it's probably helpful if you're just have a wide range of interests. And listen, there are books on a billion things, and a lot of those books are really, really, really good. There are a million good books. I mean, the easy answer to get out of a reading slump is just read better books, man. But that's not a helpful answer, I think. Because I think if you're really in a slump, even a good book probably won't interest you, maybe. But if you read something different, maybe that would help. I don't know. You'd have to watch one of those 5 or 10 or 20 ways to get out of a reading slump videos to know for sure. But I think there is a danger in reading too narrowly, to having a narrow field of interests. And I think it's probably helpful for a reader to move out of your comfort zone and expand the types of things that you read. Because maybe you will discover other fields of interest, other types of things that you might be interested in. If you read only fiction, maybe read some nonfiction on some interesting subjects. The world is full of interesting things. I think that's probably how I've avoided reading slumps. Is if a slump was coming, I probably sidestepped it by finding something else that I just became really, really interested in. And like I said, there's a certain amount of mystery. It is a mysterious phenomenon for reading slumps because I think they happen to different individuals for different reasons. And getting out of one it'll have to be a way that will work for you, because it depends on how you get into one, I think. But it is a mysterious phenomenon for me. It's, like I said, something I've avoided all of this time. But I suspect a lot of my viewers probably have experienced them. And I wonder what kind of things have helped them. So if you've ever been in a reading slump, I am interested. Let me know why you think you got into one and how you got out of it. How do you move on? How have you moved on from a reading slump? I bet a lot of people who don't make videos have had this experience. And it's just something I wonder about. And I'll shut up, Roger. I will catch you next time.